Zebulun, Daniel. Yahweh, Naphtali, Joseph, Benjamin, you're going to the promised land. We are going to the promised land. Everyone has gone before us now, yeah. Now we are left alone. And if you should reach there before us, tell them we are coming home. Oh, tell them we are coming home. We all are Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Isaac, Charles, Zebulun, Daniel. Yahweh, Naphtali, Joseph, Benjamin, we're going to the promised land. Oh, we're going to the promised land. Everyone has gone before us now, yeah. Now we are left alone. And if you should reach there before us, tell them we are coming home. Oh, tell them we are coming home. We all are going to the bottom of Jordan, people. We all are going to buy some corn, yeah, now. We all are going to the border of Egypt now, yeah. We all are coming strong, strong, strong. Give me some faith now. Coming strong, strong, strong. Oh, I need it and I need it. Strong, strong, strong. Oh, I got it and I got it. Strong, strong, strong. Give me some faith now. Strong, strong, strong. We are coming, strong, strong, strong. Oh, coming, strong, strong, strong. Let me feel it, coming.
Today on The Big Questions, should we be proud of the British Empire?
We, as a nation, have a greater level of pride in our empire than any other European nation. People look back with nostalgia to Britain's imperial past. That's impossible to understand unless we understand the massive fabric of lies, of deletions, which has airbrushed the colonial atrocities practiced everywhere we went.
Britain. What if I told you that the very wealth that built the British Empire was often stained with the blood of millions?
The British Empire was arguably one of the most evil, genocidal institutions to have ever existed. But who cares if you can even remember?
There is so much historical amnesia about what the empire really entailed. The fact that you don't really teach colonial history in your schools. There's no real awareness of the atrocities, the fact that Britain financed its industrial revolution and its prosperity from the depredations of empire.
British colonialism was responsible for more than 100 million deaths in India.
Britain took around $45 trillion out of India between 1765 and 1938. That's 14.5 times the size of the British economy today.
And that's just the tip of an iceberg when it truly comes to the whole damage done by the British in their quest for colonial power.
Forcing countries to give up their natural resources, enforced by international debt, and what we see as a net drain of wealth from the poor nations into the rich nations. This wealth is not just being taken from other people in the world today, it's also being taken from future generations.
When we think of Britain, images of tea, crumpets, and the grandeur of the monarchy often come to mind. But beneath this polished veneer lies a history that is as shocking as it is profound, a legacy of colonial crimes that reshaped nations to their ruin and devastated lives.
The highest award given to British officials who work abroad is the Order of St. Michael and St. George. This consists of a star with a little enamelled painting, and the painting shows the angel St. Michael standing on the neck of the devil, and the devil is a black man. This image is very similar to one that we've become familiar with. A policeman kneeling on George Floyd's neck as he says, "I can't breathe." And the idea of standing or kneeling on the neck of a black man is deeply embedded in these notions of dominance of white people over black people, the dominance of Western nations over other countries.
From the brutal exploitation of resources to the systematic oppression of entire cultures, Britain's colonial past is a tapestry woven with threads of violence, greed, and injustice.
And one of the recipients of this award was a man called Sir Evelyn Baring. Sir Evelyn Baring was the grandfather of someone called Mary Wakefield. Mary Wakefield is the wife of Dominic Cummings, Boris Johnson's chief advisor, a man who has done more to cover up the record of current events than anyone else in this government. Sir Evelyn Baring was governor of Kenya when Kenya was a colonial possession of the United Kingdoms. And while he was there in the 1950s, he instituted a system of concentration camps, which even his own Attorney General compared to those run by the Nazis. He drove into these concentration camps and fortified villages. Almost the entire population of the Kikuyu people, then numbering over 1 million people. Huge numbers died, some of them of starvation and disease, many beaten to death, burnt to death, tortured to death. Repeatedly, men were castrated.
The stories of oppression, forced labor, and cultural erasure are not mere footnotes in history. They are the haunting realities that demand our attention.
In some camps, almost the entire population of children died.
And until the Mau Mau are destroyed, the innocent, too, must suffer.
It was Evelyn Baring who oversaw the creation of this system.
Sir Evelyn Baring, upon whom rests the main responsibility of the campaign.
We are making progress in that struggle, and we are all confident that in the end we will succeed.
He also directly authorized the beating to death of people within those camps. When Labour MPs asked inconvenient questions about this, on one particular occasion when 11 men were beaten to death, he told the Colonial Secretary to tell the MPs that they had died from drinking contaminated water. Before Britain left Kenya, there was an order sent down, implemented by a special branch, to conduct what they called a thorough purge of the archives. They burnt crate after crate of documents. One of the orders instructed that if there were too many documents to burn, they should be packed into weighted crates, taken as far from the coast as practicable, and dumped into very deep water without currents. They erased not only the evidence of what happened in Kenya, but much of what happened in Malaya.
The British troops in Malaya, slowly but steadily, are smashing the Reds' reign of terror, and they'll keep at it till the job's done.
In Yemen, where Britain fought its dirty war, in Aden.
We're going to be extremely firm and extremely mean. If anyone starts any trouble, they'll just get the headphone off. They'll get the message in time, you know.
We remember all this in the context of Boris Johnson telling us that to pull down statues is to lie about our history. The entire history that we are told about British imperialism is a lie.
The British might say they don't do torture, but we, the Mau Mau people, have gone through their torture.
Are you ready to confront the legacy that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew? Then join us on this journey through time, where the echoes of colonialism still resonate, and discover how the shadows of the past continue to shape our world today as we gradually peel back the layers of this complex history. Before we continue, don't forget to support our efforts by hitting that like button before you. Share with your family and friends to keep spreading our eye-opening black narrative, and kindly subscribe to stay tuned in for more updates while you keep the channel growing. Your support means a lot to us. Now let us dive in. The British Empire, at its height, was the largest empire in history. It controlled roughly a quarter of the world's population and landmass, ruling over 458 million people, spanning continents and encompassing diverse cultures and societies. However, this expansion was often accompanied by a series of crimes and injustices. Its colossal achievement was further built upon systematic violence, from colonial mass killings in concentration camps to engineered famine and systematic torture.
Up to 29 million Indians starved to death under British rule, while we exported and stockpiled millions of tons of food from the country. Former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill once said, and I quote, "I hate the Indians. They're a beastly people with a beastly religion. The famine was their own fault for breeding like rabbits." Incidentally, we just put Winston Churchill on our £5 note.
Yes, you heard correctly. Their bestiality was glorified instead. In the cases of India and Palestine, British imperial rule ended in ongoing and bloody legacies of partition that have left lasting scars on the nations and peoples affected.
Up to 1,000 peaceful protesters were butchered by British colonial troops.
The empire was much more invasive and destructive than many people realize. From the Americas to Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, the British Empire engaged in a wide range of oppressive and exploitative practices that have had lasting impacts on the societies and cultures of the colonized peoples. To better understand the degree of the heinous crimes perpetrated on humanity by British colonialism, let us take them one after the other. 1. The transatlantic slave trade. Britain was a major participant in the transatlantic slave trade, which involved the forced transportation of millions of Africans to the Americas between the 16th and 19th centuries, primarily to work on plantations. This triangular trade involves sending manufactured goods to Africa, trading them for enslaved people, and then transporting these individuals to the Americas to be sold for raw materials that were then shipped back to Europe. By the 1480s, Portuguese ships were already transporting Africans for use as enslaved laborers on the sugar plantations in the Cape Verde and Madeira Islands in the eastern Atlantic. Spanish conquistadors took enslaved Africans to the Caribbean after 1502, but Portuguese merchants continued to dominate the transatlantic slave trade for another century and a half, operating from their bases in the Congo-Angola area along the west coast of Africa. The Dutch became the foremost traders of enslaved people during parts of the 1600s, and in the following century, English and French merchants controlled about half of the transatlantic slave trade, taking a large percentage of their human cargo from the region of West Africa between the Senegal and Niger rivers. In 1713, an agreement between Spain and Britain granted the British a monopoly on the trade of enslaved people with the Spanish colonies. Under the Asiento de Negros, Britain was entitled to supply those colonies with 4,800 enslaved Africans per year for 30 years. The contract for this supply was assigned to the South Sea Company, of which British Queen Anne held some 22.5% of the stock. Probably no more than a few 100,000 Africans were taken to the Americas before 1600. However, in the 17th century, demand for enslaved labor rose sharply with the growth of sugar plantations in the Caribbean and tobacco plantations in the Chesapeake region in North America. The largest numbers of enslaved people were taken to the Americas during the 18th century, when, according to historians' estimates, nearly 3/5 of the total volume of the transatlantic slave trade took place. The Atlantic Passage, or Middle Passage, usually to Brazil or an island in the Caribbean, was notorious for its brutality and for the overcrowded, unsanitary conditions on slave ships in which hundreds of Africans were packed tightly into tiers below decks for a voyage of about 5,000 miles, 8,000 kilometers, that could last from a few weeks to several months. They were typically chained together, and usually the low ceilings did not permit them to sit upright. The heat was intolerable, and the oxygen levels became so low that candles would not burn. Because crews feared insurrection, the Africans were allowed to go outside on the upper decks for only a few hours each day. Historians estimate that between 15 and 25% of the enslaved Africans bound for the Americas died aboard slave ships. After Great Britain outlawed slavery throughout its empire in 1833, the British Navy diligently opposed the trade of enslaved people in the Atlantic and used its ships to try to prevent slave trading operations. Brazil outlawed the trade of enslaved people in 1850, but the smuggling of newly enslaved persons into Brazil did not end entirely until the country finally enacted emancipation in 1888. Unfortunately, the slave trade had devastating effects in Africa. Economic incentives for warlords and tribes to engage in the trade of enslaved people promoted an atmosphere of lawlessness and violence. Depopulation and a continuing fear of captivity made economic and agricultural development almost impossible throughout much of Western Africa. And most unfortunately is the fact that a large percentage of the people taken captive were women in their childbearing years and young men who normally would have been starting families. The European enslavers usually left behind persons who were elderly, disabled, or otherwise dependent, groups who were least able to contribute to the economic health of their societies. 2. The Mau Mau uprising in Kenya.
I was involved in the Mau Mau legal case in 2011-2012 as an expert witness, and a request by the court in the Mau Mau case brought the Hansel disclosure to light. However, the British government deliberately settled the case out of court in order to avoid a full hearing where the details of what had happened would be rehearsed.
They knew it, they wanted only to deny.
And therefore only a very small fraction of the documents were actually used. And it's only now, several years on, we've had time to look at these documents more closely, that we can really begin to tell you what those documents revealed.
The Mau Mau uprising was a significant period in Kenyan history that took place between 1952 and 1960. It was a violent and bloody conflict between the British colonial authorities and the Mau Mau rebels, who were fighting for independence and land rights. The Mau Mau were both a political organization and a paramilitary group which rose in revolt during the 1940s, eventually breaking into open warfare with the British and other imperial troops in 1952. The majority of the Mau Mau revolutionaries were the Kikuyu people. The revolt was sparked by a number of factors, including land grievances, political marginalization, and economic exploitation. The Kikuyu people, who made up the majority of the population in Kenya, had been dispossessed of their land by British settlers and were forced to work as laborers on European-owned farms. Many Kikuyu also felt that they were being denied political rights and opportunities for advancement in the colonial administration. So, in response to the rebellion, the British colonial authorities declared a state of emergency in Kenya and launched a brutal counterinsurgency campaign to suppress the Mau Mau. After declaring an emergency, the British pursued a policy of divide and conquer. Civil liberties were suspended. Kikuyu were rounded up into work camps. 1.5 million people were held in camps or villages surrounded and fortified by British troops. The camps bore signs which read, "Labor and freedom." Torture and mass executions were common, including men being anally raped with bottles and other devices by guards.
We rounded up 1.5 million Kenyans, including Barack Obama's grandfather, and put them into concentration camps. 100,000 are believed to have died.
Barack Obama's grandfather, Hussein Onyango Obama, was amongst the many Kenyans who had suffered severe mistreatment in the concentration camps where they were held. This included having pins forced under his fingernails. Inside the detention camps surrounded by barbed wire, the British authorities held almost the entire Kikuyu population of 1.5 million for over 8 years, from 1951 to 1960. While some Kikuyu were dragged by military vehicles until their bodies broke into pieces, others were mauled by guard dogs before being executed. The numbers who died in the British camps are unknown because the Colonial Office and Foreign Office connived to destroy the documentation. Although officially released British records indicated that there were only 80,000 Kikuyu and other tribesmen incarcerated in the camps during the Mau Mau uprising, recently discovered documents and other records indicate that nearly the entire civilian population was placed in the camps. The British government, after being continually defeated in the High Court, agreed to settle the Mau Mau case in the year 2013. On June 6th of that year, the then UK Foreign Secretary, William Hague, announced that 5,000 survivors would each receive £3,800 payment, and also expressed the nation's sincere regrets to Kenyans who were subjected to torture and other forms of ill treatment in the hands of the colonial administration. 3. The partitioning of India. The partitioning, which took place 1947, was a significant event in the history of the Indian subcontinent. The partition was a result of the British decision to divide their Indian colony into two separate nations, India and Pakistan, and it was based on religious lines, with the predominantly Hindu regions becoming India and the predominantly Muslim regions becoming Pakistan. The partitioning was a traumatic event that led to widespread violence, displacement, and loss of lives. Millions of people were uprooted from their homes and forced to migrate to the newly created nations. The violence that accompanied the partition was brutal and resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people.
Up to 1 million Indians and Pakistanis were killed in the ensuing sectarian violence after the upheaval.
Furthermore, the effects of the partition were far-reaching and long-lasting, as the division created deep-seated animosities between Hindus and Muslims that continue to this day. The partition also led to the displacement of millions of people, many of whom lost their homes, livelihoods, and loved ones. Having political consequences, the partitioning set the stage for decades of conflict between India and Pakistan. The two nations have fought multiple wars over the disputed region of Kashmir, which was left divided between them after the partition. 4. The Anglo-Zulu War. In 1879, January 11th to July 4th, in South Africa, the British fought a war against the Zulu kingdom. The Zulus resisted bravely and were only defeated after a series of particularly bloody battles that have gone down in the annals of colonial warfare. The background of the battle began with the British having interests in Zululand. They specifically wanted the Zulu population to provide labor in the diamond fields of South Africa. They also wanted to create a South African federation in the region that included Zululand, and they wanted to settle Boer land claims in the region that included territory held by the Zulus. Following the passing of the British North America Act of 1867, forming a federation in Canada, Lord Carnarvon had thought that a similar political effort, coupled with military campaigns, might lead to a ruling white minority over a black majority, which would provide a large pool of cheap labor for the British sugar plantations and mines, encompassing the African kingdoms, tribal areas, and Boer republics into South Africa. In 1874, Sir Bartle Frere was sent to South Africa as High Commissioner for the British Empire to effect such plans. Among the obstacles were the armed independent states of the South African Republic and the Kingdom of Zululand. The Zulu Kingdom King Cetshwayo refused to submit to British control and instead organized an army of nearly 60,000 men. In December 1878, Sir Bartle Frere, the British High Commissioner of South Africa, issued an ultimatum to Cetshwayo, demanding that the Zulus dismantle their military system within 30 days and pay reparations for alleged insults. When the ultimatum was refused, in January 1879, the British troops, under the leadership of Lord Chelmsford, marched on Zululand. On January 12, 1879, an early skirmish took place at Sihayo's Kraal, with British forces led by Lord Chelmsford and the Zulus led by Makumbika Zulu Kasihayo, who was killed in the battle, resulting in a British victory. On January 22nd, the British and Zulu met at what would be known as the Battle of Isandlwana. The British Army, comprising 1,800 troops, while the Zulu Army, some 20,000 strong, was led by Nshingwayo Khoza. Despite the British having superior military resources, they faced a humiliating defeat at the hands of the Zulus. Some military authorities likened the defeat to that of General George Armstrong Custer at the Battle of the Little Bighorn River in Montana Territory, USA, in 1876. Later on the day, Cetshwayo's brother, Dabula Manzi Kampande, led the Zulu troops at Rorke's Drift, Natal Province, against British forces led by John Chard and Gonville Bromhead. The conflict, later called the Battle of Rorke's Drift, saw 140 British Army regulars defeat 4,000 Zulu warriors. However, it was quite a remarkable show of resistance on the part of the Zulu people, who did not back down from standing up for what was theirs, but a little more back and forth in the fierce battle for survival, and they were defeated by the British. Their military resource, no doubt, was their upper hand. After around 20,000 Zulus had been killed at Ulundi, and then another 6,000 slain, King Cetshwayo was hunted down and captured. The Zulu monarchy was suppressed, and Zululand divided into autonomous areas. In 1887, Zululand was declared British territory and finally annexed to Natal 10 years later. The actions of the British Empire had led to 1. Loss of land, sovereignty, and cultural identity. 2. Displacement and marginalization of the Zulu people. 3. Economic exploitation and poverty. 4. Intergenerational trauma and cultural erasure. Today, the Zulu people continue to rebuild and reclaim their heritage, seeking recognition and redress for the historical injustices perpetrated by the British Empire. 5. The Biafran Pogrom. The Biafran Pogrom, or mass killing, was the outcome of the Nigerian Civil War, or the Nigerian Biafran War, which was fought from 1967 to 1970 between Nigeria's federal government and the secessionist state, Biafra. Looking from afar, it would appear that ethnic conflict, economic inequality, and educational disparities were the factors that contributed to the start of a war which killed an estimated 500,000 to 3 million people called the Igbos, or Biafrans. But the truth is, the British colonial government had orchestrated this outcome from the jump. In this war, Nigeria was led by General Yakubu Gowon, and Biafra by Lieutenant Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu. Biafra represented the nationalist aspirations of the Igbo ethnic group, whose leadership felt they could no longer coexist with the federal government dominated by the interests of the Muslim Hausa Fulanis of northern Nigeria. The conflict resulted from political, ethnic, cultural, and religious tensions, which preceded the United Kingdom's formal decolonization of Nigeria from 1960 to 1963. Immediate causes of the war in 1966 included a military coup, a counter-coup, and anti-Igbo pogroms in northern Nigeria. This civil war can be connected to the colonial amalgamation in 1914 of the Northern Protectorate, Lagos Colony, and Southern Nigeria Protectorate, which was intended for better administration due to the proximity of these protectorates. However, the amalgam didn't take into consideration the differences in the culture and religions of the people in each region. This the British colonialist had intentionally positioned to keep them always coming into the nation's affairs. Thus, unhealthy competition for political and economic power cannot be avoided. After a pogrom of Igbos in northern Nigeria in May 1967, the Igbo people seceded from Nigeria and declared the establishment of the Republic of Biafra. The British government at this point demanded that Nigeria must stay as one country, despite huge religious, linguistic, and ethnic differences. However, with the help of the British, the Nigerian government would blockade Biafra in order to starve its population. The British government would also be the main suppliers of firearms to the Nigerian army during this war in question. Between 1966 and 1970, more than 3 million of the Igbo tribe were murdered in the Biafran War. Alongside the concurrent Vietnam War, the Nigerian Civil War was one of the first wars in human history to be televised to a global audience. In mid-1968, images of malnourished and starving Biafran children saturated the mass media of Western countries. The plight of the starving Biafrans became a cause célèbre in foreign countries. 6. The Second Anglo-Boer War. The Second Anglo-Boer War, also known as the South African War, was fought between the British Empire and the two Boer republics of the Orange Free State and the South African Republic, Transvaal, from October 11, 1899 to May 31, 1902. The conflict was sparked by tensions over British imperial ambitions in South Africa and the Boers' desire to maintain their independence and control over their territories. The war began in October 1899 when the British, under the leadership of Sir Redvers Buller, invaded the Boer republics in an attempt to assert their dominance. The Boers, who were skilled guerrilla fighters, initially had the upper hand and inflicted several defeats on the British forces. However, the British eventually gained the upper hand due to their superior numbers and resources. Under pressure to swiftly conclude the Second Anglo-Boer War from 1900 to 1902, the British Army, under General Kitchener, launched a brutal campaign to systematically clear Boer guerrilla fighters from the South African Republic and Orange Free State. Kitchener's troops established a network of concentration camps, burnt farms, and slaughtered livestock. They subsequently deployed waves of irregular troops and mobile columns to hunt down the guerrillas. The camps were set up to house Boer women and children who were displaced by the war and to prevent them from aiding the Boer guerrilla fighters. Conditions in the camps were harsh and overcrowded, with inadequate food, shelter, and medical care. The camps were poorly managed, and disease spread quickly among the inhabitants. Many of the women and children in the camps died from malnutrition, diseases such as typhoid and dysentery, and exposure to the elements. The effects were devastating. The British authorities justified the establishment of the camps as a necessary measure to control the Boer population and to prevent them from supporting the Boer fighters. The Boer women and children in the camps were subjected to harsh treatment by the British authorities, who viewed them as enemies of the state. Many of the women were separated from their children and forced to perform hard labor in the camps. In the end, almost 28,000 Boers died in British concentration camps, and about 22,000 of them were children, though the British failed to keep records for the estimated 20,000 black Africans that also died in the camps. 7. The Amritsar mass execution. The Amritsar mass killing, also known as the Jallianwala Bagh mass killing, was a tragic event that took place on April 13, 1919, in the city of Amritsar, in the Punjab region of India. The mass unaliving was carried out by British troops under the command of Brigadier General Reginald Dyer, and resulted in the deaths of hundreds of unarmed Indian civilians. The events leading up to the mass killing began with the implementation of the Rowlatt Act in 1919, which allowed the British government to imprison individuals without trial. This act was met with widespread protests and strikes across India, as Indians felt that their civil liberties were being violated. In Amritsar, tensions were particularly high due to the presence of a large number of Sikh pilgrims who had gathered to celebrate the festival of Baisakhi. So, on April 13th, 1919, a large crowd of around 10,000 people gathered in the Jallianwala Bagh, a public garden close to the Golden Temple complex in the city of Amritsar. While some were there to protest colonial laws against public gatherings, others were there to take part in the Baisakhi festival and usher in the arrival of spring. Brigadier Reginald Dyer, who had been sent to Amritsar to restore order, arrived at the scene with a group of soldiers and, without warning, ordered his troops to open fire on the unarmed crowd. The soldiers fired indiscriminately into the crowd for about 10 minutes until they ran out of ammunition, killing and injuring hundreds of people, including women and children. The mass killing was brutal and merciless. Many of the victims were shot in the back as they tried to flee. The soldiers further blocked the only exit to the garden, trapping the crowd inside and preventing them from escaping. However, the mass killing sparked outrage and condemnation, both in India and around the world. Mahatma Gandhi, who was leading the nonviolent resistance movement against British rule, described the mass killing as an act of wanton cruelty and called for a nationwide protest. The British government, however, defended Brigadier Dyer's actions, claiming that he had acted in self-defense and to maintain order. In the aftermath of the gruesome mass killing, the British government set up a committee of inquiry, known as the Hunter Commission, to investigate the events at Amritsar. The commission found Brigadier Dyer guilty of excessive and indiscriminate force, and he was removed from his command. Nevertheless, he was not prosecuted for his actions, and was even hailed as a hero by the British public, who raised £26,000 for him as a thank you. The Amritsar mass killing stands as one of the most bloody episodes of violence against peaceful protesters in the history of the British Empire. 8. The Bengal Famine. The Bengal Famine of 1943 was one of the most devastating famines in Indian history, resulting in the deaths of millions of people. The famine was caused by a combination of factors, including a severe cyclone that hit the region in October 1942, destroying crops and infrastructure, and the policies of the British colonial government. The cyclone destroyed large areas of farmland in Bengal, leading to a significant decrease in food production. But instead of finding ways to salvage the situation, the British government, under pressure from World War II, implemented policies that exacerbated the famine. They diverted food supplies from Bengal to feed the British troops and the war effort, leading to a shortage of food in the region. At the time, Britain blamed the consequences of famine on adverse weather conditions and food shortfalls, portraying the tragedy as an unavoidable natural disaster. However, in reality, what approximated mass starvation was not an act of nature, but was entirely engineered by the colonial lords. As the food shortage worsened, prices skyrocketed, making it impossible for many people to afford even the most basic necessities. The government's response to the famine was slow and inadequate, with officials downplaying the severity of the situation and failing to provide adequate relief to those affected. However, the effects of the famine were devastating. Millions of people died from starvation and disease, with reports of people resorting to eating grass and leaves to survive. The most vulnerable groups, such as children and the elderly, were particularly hard hit. As Bengal grappled with famine in 1942, Winston Churchill, former British Prime Minister, decided to export thousands of tons of grain to support a parallel famine in Greece and sustain the British war effort. And as if that wasn't enough torture, India was also banned from using its own sterling reserves to acquire food for its starving population. As millions of tons of wheat were exported back to the UK, Winston Churchill famously said, "I hate Indians. They are a beastly people with a beastly religion. The famine was their own fault for breeding like rabbits." How cruel and mean. The underlying causes of the Bengal famine were thus not drought, but the policy decisions of the British government. 9. The Briggs Plan in Malaysia. The Briggs Plan was a controversial counterinsurgency strategy implemented by the British colonial government in Malaya, now Malaysia, during the Malayan Emergency, a period of armed conflict between communist insurgents and British forces from 1948 to 1960. The plan was named after British General Sir Harold Briggs, who devised the strategy in an effort to defeat the communist guerrillas known as the Malayan National Liberation Army, MNLA. The Briggs Plan was based on the concept of hearts and minds warfare, which aimed to win the support of the local population and isolate the insurgents from their sources of support. The plan involved the resettlement of rural villagers into fortified new villages in order to cut off the MNLA's access to food, supplies, and recruits. The new villages were, however, designed to be self-sufficient communities with schools, clinics, and other amenities to improve the quality of life for the residents. Notwithstanding, the implementation of the Briggs Plan was met with mixed reactions from the local population. While some villagers welcomed the improved living conditions and protection from the insurgents, others resented being uprooted from their homes and forced to live in what they saw as internment camps. The plan also faced criticism from human rights organizations for its use of collective punishment and restrictions on freedom of movement. Despite these challenges, the Briggs Plan was ultimately successful in weakening the MNLA and restoring government control over the rural areas of Malaya. The combination of military operations, intelligence gathering, and civic action initiatives helped to erode support for the insurgents and undermine their ability to operate effectively. By the end of the Malayan Emergency in 1960, the MNLA had been defeated and the country was able to transition to independence without the threat of communist insurgency. 10. The Irish Potato Famine. The British did not cause what we know as the Irish Potato Famine, which affected potatoes across the continent of Europe as well as Ireland. It was caused by a potato blight that destroyed the potato crops. But the starvation in Ireland and the deaths which resulted from the famine were wholly preventable, and the British Empire did little or nothing to prevent it other than assign Charles Trevelyan, a man with a near-psychotic hatred of the Irish in general, and the poor in particular, to direct their policy. As the rate of deaths from the famine were nearing their peak, the man tasked with providing aid to the suffering wrote to Lord Monteagle that the famine was an effective mechanism for reducing surplus population. In 1845, the year the famine began, Ireland was part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, and for several decades, Ireland had grappled with poverty and unemployment in its cities, and though there was ample Irish representation in the British Parliament, few workable solutions to the Irish problem were proposed. Irish resentment of the British and British contempt for the Irish was palpable. Most of the Irish, 80% of whom were Catholics, lived as tenant farmers on estates owned by absentee landlords who used middlemen to collect their rents. The crops the tenant farmers grew were for export, and the profits went to the landlords. They were allowed to grow a few crops for themselves and their families, and the potato was one crop favored for this due to its yield, and, unlike wheat, the fact that it could be used without further processing. When the potato crops failed, they were left with no food, little money, and spent their days working crops which would provide no food for themselves. In response to the famine, the British government attempted to provide aid to these tenant farmers by removing tariffs on grain to lower the price of bread, the Corn Laws. This act led to the fall of the British government, and the new government adopted the attitude of laissez-faire towards the crisis. Charles Trevelyan was then assigned to administer the new government's response to the famine. Trevelyan believed that the famine was the judgment of God to teach the Irish a lesson, and did little to provide help to the starving. Whatever aid that was sent to Ireland from the British government and other charities around the world was his responsibility to distribute, and he delayed the delivery as much as possible, or tied its distribution to labor requirements. In 1847, Parliament passed the Irish Poor Laws, which established both workhouses and soup kitchens. The export of food from Ireland during famine reached new heights as the Irish people starved. In the case of the starving Irish, the food they grew for the profit of the landowners was too expensive for them to purchase. At a minimum, the famine led to over 1 million deaths, and over that number of Irish emigrated, many to the United States and Canada. In 1860, one of the founders of the Young Ireland movement wrote, "The Almighty indeed sent the potato blight, but the English created the famine." 11 British invasion of the Chinese state of Tibet in 1903. In August 1903, General Francis Younghusband led a party of British officers and a large support unit of soldiers from British India towards Tibet, which was at the time a state governed by China under a deal struck in 1720. They spent about 3 months setting up and positioning the expedition at the Chinese borders. Then they waited for an excuse to move into Tibet. Why? General Younghusband had come to believe that Russia had a large secret military presence in Tibet and was planning an invasion to sweep across multiple borders, snatching Tibet from the Chinese and taking India away from the British. World domination was the plan. The contest was called the Great Game. He, however, had 2 pieces of evidence. One was the presence of a Russian monk named Arghvan Digiev in the Dalai Lama's group of senior supporters, and another was the sighting of a cluster of Russian rifles in Tibet. The general wanted to head off the Russians and invade Tibet himself, taking at least part of it from Chinese rule to British rule, as they had done with Hong Kong on the other side of the same country. But he needed an excuse to justify crossing the border, so he repeatedly tried to provoke the Chinese protectorate into a confrontation. Unfortunately, the army struggled to get the violent response they wanted. Then, in December, the British heard about some tension in the area, with Tibetans trespassing into Nepal. This was not technically part of India, but could be viewed as a de facto protectorate of the British. Younghusband interpreted this as an act of Tibetan hostility against the British and claimed the moral right to cross into Chinese territory. It was later shown that the incident was small and had been misrepresented. Some Nepalese yaks and their drovers had trespassed into Tibet, and the locals had driven them back. But by then the invasion had started. The heavily armed British party moved into Tibet on December 12, 1903. The 3,000 fighting men were armed with 2 Maxim machine guns and 4 pieces of heavy artillery. Literally, thousands of workers followed to service the troops, and there were several thousand mules and yaks to carry food and weapons. The British Army included many Gurkhas and Sikhs who had experience at fighting at high terrains where the air was thinner. General Younghusband, anxious to present the British as heroes, was intent on presenting the invasion as the fault of the Russians. When the British encountered Tibetan leaders, they insisted that this was not an invasion, although this was plainly untrue. Armies don't march into other countries bristling with weapons. The situation became tense, and in open ground near a village called Guru, fighting broke out, with British accounts saying that a Tibetan fired the first shot after arguing with a Sikh from the invading army. The British had advanced weaponry and a highly trained army, while the Tibetans had primitive muskets, handmade swords, plus bows and arrows, knives, and herding whips. Also, most of the Tibetan soldiers were peasants, shepherds, or monks pressed into service. It was no contest, just wholesale slaughter. In a short space of time, one witness said 4 minutes, hundreds of Tibetans lay dead. The remainder turned to flee. "Bag as many as you can," the British commander said, using a hunting term for killing. Soldiers shot the retreating Tibetans in the back, although at least one eventually lowered his rifle. As Lieutenant Arthur Hadow, commander of the Maxim Guns Detachment, wrote, "I got so sick of the slaughter that I ceased fire, though the general's order was to make as big a bag as possible. I hope I shall never again have to shoot down men walking away." At least 700 Tibetans died in what became known as the mass killing of Chumikshenko. The result was a bloody river winding down the snowy mountain range, and that was the prelude to what some call the War of Gyansi. 2 more battles followed, the first at Red Idol Gorge, again easily won by the British. The final stand for the locals was at a high-level rock fort at Gyansi. With British superiority in weapons, strategy, and combat, the Tibetans quickly lost the final fight too. Today, the 1903 invasion of Tibet has been largely forgotten in the West, but the Chinese remember what happened. A melodramatic 1997 Mandarin language movie called Red River Valley dramatized the tale and won several awards in that country. These are only some of the crimes perpetrated by the British as they carried the greatest land grab the world has ever seen. Now, while many celebrate the British Empire for its contributions to global trade, governance, and culture, a deeper examination reveals a shocking truth. The empire's expansion was built on a foundation of colonial crimes that have left lasting scars on nations and peoples around the world. The transatlantic slave trade, which saw millions forcibly taken from their homes and subjected to inhumane conditions, stands as one of the most egregious examples of Britain's colonial crimes. The wealth generated from this exploitation fueled the very prosperity that Britain now celebrates. Judging from the brutal subjugation of indigenous populations in North America and Australia to the horrific famines in India exacerbated by British policies, it is clear that the empire's actions were often marked by a blatant disregard for human life and dignity. Moreover, the legacy of colonialism is not merely a relic of the past. It continues to shape global inequalities and social injustices today. The borders drawn by colonial powers often disregarded ethnic and cultural realities, leading to ongoing conflicts and instability in formerly colonized regions. The economic systems established during colonial rule have perpetuated cycles of poverty and dependency that many nations are still struggling to overcome. In conclusion, Britain's legacy is not one of benevolence or progress, but rather a complex and often painful narrative of colonial crimes that demand acknowledgement and reparative justice. To truly understand and address the ramifications of this legacy, we must face the truth of our past and engage in meaningful dialogue about accountability, reparations, and the path toward healing for those still affected by the empire's actions. Only then can we begin to dismantle the structures of inequality that persist in the wake of colonialism and work towards a more equitable future. That brings us to the end of yet another video segment.
Oppressors in this town. Too much, too much, too much, too much, too much. Too much oppressors in this town. Too much, too much, too much, too much, too much. And my wife big them push like the dreadlock. I run. Too much, too much, too much, too much, too much. Too much oppressors in this town. No matter what I do, I can't seem to too much oppression. Can't stand it no longer under these conditions. Too much oppression. A Rasta man him can't even make a plan. Too much oppression. All because of the Babylon man. Too much oppressors in this town. Too much oppressors in this town. Too much oppressors. Oppression make a wise man mad. But I won't be mad. No. Oh well, we cannot take it no longer. Man, I tell you, cannot take it no longer. Man, I tell you that the battle getting harder. Time is getting harder. And then I tell you about the hunger. Another time, I tell you about the pressure. Another time, I tell you about the bloodshed. Another time, I say too much oppressors in this town. Too much. Oh well, too much oppressors in this town. Them a want become push nasty dreadlocks around. Too much. Oh well. Oppression make a wise man mad. Oppression make a wise man mad. Oh well. I won't be mad and I won't be sad. I've got to leave out of this your land. Whoa. Get it long. Too much oppression. Africans living all about to let themselves be known. Black man, alright. Africans living all about to let themselves be known. Africans, alright. Africans living all about to let themselves be known as the right ones. Alright. Look at them. African descendant, we are African descendant. African descendant. Ooh. Africans living all about to let themselves be known as black men. Alright. Africans living all about to let themselves be known as the right ones. Alright. Africans living all about to let themselves be known as Africans. Oh yeah. Look at them. Yes. We are African descendant. African descendant. Yes. African descendant. Africans living all about to let themselves be known as the right ones. Alright. Africans living all about to let themselves be known as one. Alright. Africans living all about to let themselves be known as Africans. Alright. Take it easy now. Right ones. We are the Africans. African descendant. Oh, African descendant. Yes. African descendant. Africans living all about to let themselves be known as Africans. Alright. Africans living all about to let themselves be known as the right ones. sleep. Yeah, 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 yeah. But Jaja never sleep. No, 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 no. No, no, no. Jaja never sleep. Never, never. Never, never. Never, never. Never, never. Never, 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 never.
So they said that you're a big man moving up to the higher land, giving no respect to the poor man. No, no. So they say they are the heathen, treading on and they don't care. But I know a judge rule everywhere. So hey, all the heathen are gone, a judge rule down there. Whoa, whoa. All the heathen are gone, a judge rule everywhere. Whoa, hey. All the heathen are gone, a judge rule down there. Whoa, whoa. All the heathen are gone, a judge rule everywhere.
But now that I've made it, you keep on coming back. Still on things, still yes, I'm moving. Yes, I'm going all over town. No stumbling block can hold me back. I'm like a raging storm. You said I couldn't make it, but now you must be mine. But now that I've made it, you keep on coming back. Jah is my savior, Jah is my Lord, my foundation and my builder. No, you see the place, the holy Mount Zion. Rasta know, oh, oh, the earth is the fullness and cannot be moved. Abide it forever. Jah I going out and coming in. See, you said I couldn't make it, but now you must be mine. But now that I've made it, you keep on coming back. Deliver me, Jah, from my enemy into a world of peace. Can't you see? I said progress must be for one and all to be. You said I couldn't make it, but now you must be mine. But now that I've made it, you keep on coming back. You see?
Stop the war and crime, oh now. Don't you do right. Babylon, stop pressure the people. Stop brainwash their mind. All the teach me is evil. Make the youth them a do no crime. Babylon, stop
pressure the people. Stop brainwash them mind. All of you are teachers evil. Make the youth them turn to crime. Brothers and sisters, stop the fighting. Put down your weapon. Let's start uniting. Remember the days in old time days, long time ago, when the children live as one. Yeah. Remember we have to live up to the same thing. Stop killing your brothers, stop killing your sisters. Let's join hands and hearts, sing. Babylon, stop pressure the people. Stop brainwash their mind. All of you are teachers evil. Make the youth them turn to crime. And Babylon, stop pressure the people. Stop brainwash their mind. All of you are teachers evil. Make the youth them turn to crime. And read a chapter a day, scare the devil away.
Still all this nice stuff that I shout and want.
Try to do the things that's right. Listen to your mother. Don't disobey your father. Try to live the way you just said.
Teasing time, cultural expression, we're there with you. We're just coming. Yeah, you know, you've heard England. There's so much I can play about England. And you hear, and you should recognize that them people there in Palestine, you know who their teachers were and are. The same thing has come to bump again. Same actions, starving, depleting, murdering, and everybody just watch, you know, just like the old Roman situation where people just watch the gladiators, them, you know, the tough man, them, have arms and everything. And them enjoy themselves watching. But justice, the United Nations supposed to amplify justice, equality, freedom, justice, and equality for the world. And them develop as nations across the earth, legal systems, law, rights of law, social justice, and them have organized structures that intentionally assess and evaluate social justice all across the earth. You don't have to subscribe. It's just that the world family in the United Nations took it upon themselves to care. But what is happening is the judges are there, the legalities are there, international law, international justice, but at this point it's not being applied, it's not being implemented. There have been no focus. And the nations of the world show that they're vulnerable by not removing themselves from such decadence and atrocity. So the question is, why are they just sitting there? Someone threatens them as to what tomorrow, months, years down the road may bring. You know, sanctions and sanctions. And maybe some of them, they've taken international loans. Now, if you're taking international loans and then you're going to request fair play and justice and equality, and then you know that you'll be threatened with sanctions, and those sanctions first are the debt that you're in from the International Monetary Fund, and plus you may be depending on nutrition or medication. You have to think long and hard. And even though you don't really want to go down that road, you've already put yourself and your administration in that dire predicament. I understand those things. But especially Africa, that is so resourceful, I don't know why they get into that. Why does that happen? I mean, seriously, why does it happen? Because there's so much millions of us. And all we have to do is share. Nothing more, nothing less. Just share. So we won't accept to be abused and to be victimized by somebody and threatened by them. Because if we don't do this, or if we do this, this is what's going to happen. And we're scared of the sanctions. And because of that, we're nobodies. That's supposed to show us that we're not actually, we're on the same continent, but we're not part and parcel of fairness. We're not truly Pan-Africans. We're not exemplifying cohesion. We're not building fairness and implementing fairness. We're not communicating. We're not morally righteous. We're taking our orders from other than ourselves on our own continent. It has nothing to do with tribalism, has nothing to do with language. It has to do with pure hypocrisy that's been inflicted upon us by the colonial past. We haven't cut ties with that past. We shouldn't be waiting for sovereignty. We're waiting to be justified and to be acknowledged by the same people that moved in and abused us. We should not be waiting for them. We should not be putting ourselves in a position where we cannot justify ourselves, act and react without their acknowledgement and without their consent. We're not children. And even if we were, we're our own people. The status that some of us have given to these people is more than we give to God. We're meant to submit willingly to God, because there's nothing in this earth that we can do without, and we give thanks to God for everything. But then we behave like, yo, these Europeans, they've got everything and they gave us everything, and we're lying to ourselves. So those of us who say we're religious, we're not. We're religious, we're following men, human. We don't see ourselves understanding submission. But let me put a parable in this space. If water were withheld from us for whatever purpose, in whatever reason, what can we do? Humans, what can we do? And that's if. We all wake up or turn our taps or go to our reservoirs, and then the alarm starts ringing. We ain't got no water. What do? What, look for those who sanction us prior? They ain't got no water also. So we're all in the same boat. Boat? Now, we can't make water. That's why I chose water. What are we going to do? And that's just not for religious-minded people or religious people. That's for all of us. Whether you call yourself an agnostic, an atheist, a Muslim, a Christian, whatever. We can't do anything. And obviously, we're going to run out whatever food that we have stored. We're going to run out. Because without water, what is going to grow? Our greatest incubators that's doing all sorts of stuff around supermarkets and producing all of these little plants here, there, and everywhere in half an hour and so forth, replenishing the shelves with Brussels sprouts, this, and this, at people's requests, the customers' requests. That ain't going to work either. I mean, electro food ain't working. Pharmaceutical foods won't work. What we going to do? What we going to do? Because there's no fluid. There's no water. Fairness. And the women, they've been ostracized. They're not allowed. They seem not to be allowed to express themselves because they have that pain, that feeling And they exemplify easily the women. When you see that happens, has not been happening, and they be denied, you know that man's gone crazy. And it's not sexual discrimination, it's evil discrimination. Nothing to do with the sexes, nothing to do with feminism. That's a stupid argument. Nothing to do with that. It's just that the man has become discriminated against his counterpart. And it's been done deliberately, it's been orchestrated, it's been discussed. Because they want to refuse emotion. To whom are we responsible to and for? Ourselves. Why is the lives of Africans and Palestinians not valued by the Caucasian world? And that's in general terms. Why? I don't think that the world has actually studied, reflect, and looked at what has happened to Africa and to the captured people. But what they keep trying to do is tell some of us to say that our own fathers sold us off. Our own fathers deliberately sold us off, and Arabs were the first one that put us in slavery. Like slavery only started with Arabs, whoever they are with Africa. Slavery was happening all throughout the Roman Empire and all these different bodies that wouldn't show fairness and respect for others, always going somewhere and fighting, pillaging, looting. You ain't got that with Africa going outside of its borders, going outside of the continent, pillaging. They had their feuds. Yes, we did. And we took women as prizes. And we took men to weaken the opposition, obviously, that we fought against. You'd be foolish if you didn't. Even though treaties were signed and all sorts of arrangements were made, you're still thinking like, yo, they were strong, you know. We just about beat them. So we got to weaken them. So that's where the slave, that capturing of people. But there were some tribes, nations, people that just said, yo, you see those women? Take them. Now, I wasn't there, so I don't know if the men saw them as beautiful, this, that, and the other, and said, listen, we're going to have them and capture them and take them back to where they're from. And there are historical evidence for different races and tribes to settle their differences by swapping women and had a plead. That happened here. The Muslims, the Arabs, the Persians introduced that, highlighted that to the British, to the Europeans. So hence, France, Germany, even Russia, to quench their warring feuds, that kind of arrangements were made. Oh, but some of you don't read, is it? Some of you don't listen and research different countries' culture, different countries' experiences, so you get an understanding of who they are, what they're about, what they were about, and perhaps what they've held on to. England and France feud for decades, and Germany, and like I said, Russia. The monarch of England is not English. It haven't been English for decades. It's a mixture and a combination of different peoples to stop the feuding, pillaging, murdering, the whole victimization. But Britain went out and did that to other people. And they know in numbers they could do a lot. And they just became the world bullies. And then when the gun came, then things got terrible. I'm trying to imagine stones and sticks and stones matching up to trying to compete or defend ourselves against pellets first, then before they got these bullocks, you know. And the pellets was dangerous because you just couldn't duck, because they're scattered. So you will get, the person that they're aiming at will get hit, and the persons that they're not aiming at, once they're in the vicinity, they get hit too. So they could take a lot of people out with these shotgun, they were calling them later on, pellet bullocks. Cartridge, not pellets, cartridges. Describing England. All these Europeans, but England. So to mentally divide the African in the diaspora now, they paint a picture of things that you've just heard that they were the recipients of. They were the perpetrators, of castrating people, doing all sorts of stuff. And they spoke about themselves understanding and working along with the Portuguese. Nothing about no Arabs. It was to stop that Arab trade, that Middle Eastern trade, that Eastern trade, that Persian trade, that Moroccan trade. Al-Islam, listen, what is called the Middle East is part of Africa. You got to know your geography and what they did and how they come by dealing with what they did to create the Gulf. You got to understand that. Because we walked from Medina into Abyssinia and vice versa. We are one big family, huge family, with culture and different customs. That's understood. A lot of Muslims don't tell you all about the first migration to save our lives was in Abyssinia. Yes. So we never said it was in Africa. It was in Abyssinia. It was our own. So that distinction, that division about Arabs and that racial division is what has also caused us from not advancing outside of the Caucasian. Because now we're searching for an excellence of ourselves and still can't find it because it's within us. Then we go against ourselves. I'm not Nigerian, I'm Ghanaian, I'm not Ghanaian, and I'm not Caribbean, I'm not African, black and all of this. Now, where is the Caucasian speaking like that? When they split Africa up, they did not fight. Well, they did. In South Africa, the Boers and the British fought them each other. But they didn't fight anywhere other place for any of us and for any part of the land, any part of the continent. History again, not mine's, theirs, about me. Listen to that and realize that they're the tutors, they're the lecturers of all this despicable stuff that's happening and has been happening. You were all looking at Germany, Germany, Germany. Please now look. I don't understand why anybody don't say, yo, this seems to be like Germany all over again. It's because the same people have told you that they've been a victim of the Germans. And you're not meant to speak about that because you'll be called anti-Semitic and you're going against this, and every grain that is about the freedom of expression, the freedom of speech is now none and void. It's a crime. Sorry, it's a crime. Justice is what we have not received, and justice is what the Palestinian people are not receiving. Obviously not. And the people who are inflicting are now being told by Britain, by France, by Germany, by those so-called top 6 or 7 so-called first worlders that they've got their back. Because if it wasn't the case and they felt threatened by being arrested and taken to The Hague and have to be judged for the acts to which they have committed and their peoples, their armies, and so forth, they don't care. Because they're being backed and they're being told categorically something. So they're continuing to do and do worse, because look at the buildings. You know, they say, oh, Hamas is there. They're sticking to their statement that they want to remove whoever they deem to be Hamas from the earth. That's why now they're saying that wherever they deem Hamas or representatives of Hamas are, they're going to go and kill them. Now, please listen to that. Listen to their statements. And you Christians, why are you letting them use the Bible to justify the ills, some of their ills? Is that because you don't know your book or you're not really worshiping God? Yeah, because, you know, your God is Jesus. You see, the push has come to shove. The new Pope hasn't addressed the earth, the world, hasn't addressed his flock. He hasn't said to the flock what he's going to be maintaining that the previous Pope were doing. What he's going to annex, what he's going to bring into place, what he's going to maintain, and the fact that he sees the world in a bad state. And we don't want to hear nothing about climate zones. We want to hear about humanity. We ain't heard anything because he is part of, allegedly, American blood. Maybe he's also taking instructions from the American administration. It's sad what is taking place. What has been taking place and what has been allowed, it is being allowed. The citizens that saw injustice, their hearts and their souls, put them out there to say to the politicians, leaders of this earth, of different countries, to do something, stop this. Those same people and spent their time looking at how they can affect laws on those people who are demonstrating. Because they realized it was just making them look sad and shame, and they were ashamed. They sacked teachers, doctors. They dismissed students. But at the same time, they were looking for ideas on how to inflict laws to prohibit those people from protesting against the genocidal actions that's been are taking place in Palestine. This is what these governments have been doing. But just recent, you have this ICE thing, this immigration thing. Then here now you have this fascist thing. And one set of people is saying it's a two-tier law. So that group now, the government, they want to show the people that that's not the case. By saying, you show us something, and we'll show you that we're not two-tier. Now we're really, really, really in trouble. We're really in trouble. Moral fairness, moral righteousness, it's gone to the laboratory. Administration of law doesn't exist. Social justice doesn't exist. International human rights doesn't exist. It was a talking point, a fear talking point. The implementation, we was led to believe, yes, it's there, it's looking after, right? And we just have to rid the world of poverty, and we have all these charities, and all these charities are in Palestine. And there's so much food, tons, and medication, but wasn't allowed to be given to the people. Then Ramadan come, the people are fasting. They can't get medication to help those who need it. Incubators are not available. Operations are done without anesthetic. No electricity, can't utilize any of the resources that needs power and fuel. I'm getting a headache. Wallah, I need to go.
Got to hear me now. The truth is revealing it.
You see what I mean? The truth. The truth.
Jah, itinerary, Africa, Zion.
How much people them want to be like Jonah. Yes, want to be like Jonah. If you know Jonah, you want to be like Jonah. How much of you? Fret not, be like Jonah. Say to yourself, I'm Jonah. Today, tomorrow, and every day. Come!
Jah, itinerary, Africa, Zion.
African love is true. So we say give thanks, share, pass it on to other people. God willing, inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow. Guidance.